Konnichiwa, motherfucker. Probably not the best.
It's gonna start going like this.
I said I was thinking of a great intro to bring this in related to the theme. I blanked out because right before this recording, I noticed that my bed was elevated a little bit from the back, and it looked like there was like a body underneath there, and it freaked me out. I don't want that happening when we're going to be talking about the topic or the theme for this episode, which is superstitions, beliefs, and yokai. So welcome to Kanpai Kronicles, all on, yes, hello, our favorite dear listeners, our Yabai gang, our Yabai squad, with your host, Norman, and
Holly.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the supernatural, hopefully. Well, supernatural. I mean, when I was pitching this idea to you, Holly, it was more on what people believe in Japan and how that translates to either their culture or how they view certain things. But, you know, just a quick Google on like beliefs and superstitions. And there's a whole boatload of fuckery out there on the internet, and it stems from this one island country. So I'm quite excited to start this off.
Yeah, I feel like this is a topic that we can like continue to revisit throughout the time because there's just so much like more kind of like serious academic sort of stuff, and then like okay, what is this? So it's a nice broad thing. So we'll just see how the conversation goes.
Yeah, and with that being said, starting this off with the usual tradition of
Cracking a cold one
for the boys, for the ghost boy.
The boys.
This time it's just a standard tiger. It's still lockdown from my end, so sadly I can't go to the premium store to get like an Asahi or Sapporo, but that's for another episode sooner or later. So, beliefs, superstitions. Before we even get into like the crazy things that Japan like has conjured up or believe in, Holly, do you believe in ghosts or spirits or
I
superstitions?
do, yeah, actually. Well, actually, I totally forgot about this when I woke up. The last time when I was going to sleep, I was like, man, how much do I want to talk about like in this episode? Because I'm already like perceived, as kind of like weird. So I'm like, oh, like how weird do like I want people to think I am. But yeah, no, I do. I feel like I think that kids in particular are like really open to like receiving like a lot of otherworldly like kind of information. And then as we grow up, we kind of are like disillusioned to it for various reasons. We get like more busy, we're not as imaginative. And then like also if you talk about that stuff with like your parents or people in your life, they're like, no, don't be crazy. Like people are gonna think you're like schizophrenic or something if you're like, oh my God, like I see this thing over there. Um, but I feel like when I was little, I had a lot of those sort of like experiences, especially with my older sister. So like when I'm with friends and stuff and we're telling like ghost stories and stuff, that's always like interesting to visit. And then like my family, um, it's actually I don't know how to talk about it yet. Right now for school, I'm reading a lot of books on spirituality and how that's like different from religion or whatever. So these are thoughts that I'm still working with. But my mom's side of the family they come from like the like Mediterranean, like some from Greece and some from Italy. Um, so that side of the family, though, like on paper, they were like Catholic and would go to the Catholic church and stuff. Um, at home, like in practice, there's lots of like superstitions and kind of like spiritual stuff going on. And so I was always fascinated by like the notion of like the Greek gods. And when I started learning about Japan and like yokai, I thought it was really cool because it's kind of like similar, like gods and deities, they all kind of like have this role versus like in standard like westernized like religions and stuff. It's like this one dude who just has like done it all. So I gravitate more towards a more like spiritual experience. So I'm like for all of that shit. What about you?
Yeah, I have a native background. So like
Right. Yeah.
spirituality is like in our blood. So for our dear listeners, for our Yabai squad, a little bit about me. I come from an indigenous tribe. So similar to the Native American tribes in the US, we have native tribes on the island of Borneo. I come from the Iban tribe, and we had our own religion that has something similar to animism. So, God is in the forest, or God is within the animals, the trees, the plants, and there's superstitions here and there. Specifically for our tribes, we were formerly headhunters. So hundreds of years ago, we would be raiding other tribes, uh, pillaging and conquering, and basically taking hits. And it all of this is done in jungle combat. And for the most bravest of warriors, we have trophies, and those trophies are the skulls of other warriors that have defeated. So we would have those skulls preserved and hung above our doors. And those are times when, like, I mean, obviously, by the time I was born, like headhunting's already stopped because I mean, holy shit, that'd be pretty strange. I nearly said sick, which is totally going to be condemning me. Uh, but that would be really, of course, very unethical if we continue headhunting.
Mm.
And so I would grow up with these skulls looking back at me whenever I go back to the longhouse, like this long jungle wooden longhouse with like 25 families, 5 hours into the jungle by drive, like by car. And there will be like 8 or 9 of them above the door. And I never knew what they were until I had to ask my mom, like when I was older. I was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "Those are the skulls of our enemies from years ago." And we're like, "Oh, okay." And I was thinking of it from like I used to watch a lot of American cartoons, so I was like, "Oh, is it like a war or something like this?" Like, no, 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 it's under tribes. But don't worry, you don't have to know that history. It's fine. We stop. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I mean, that's of course one of the many things, but essentially growing up with that kind of talk, spirituality ended up becoming the sole, almost the sole influence of how can I react with X, right? Whether it's the food, the other people, foreigners, other cultures. What about your things in the forest, right? Where do you hunt? When should you kill? When should you not kill, etc. And of course, we have our own fair share of ghost shit. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of it comes in the form of like dreams and nightmares. So
Yeah.
we have many stories of um, our extended families or cousins, etc. They would do something wrong, and then they go to sleep, and then their ancestor would go into their brain during their while they're dreaming, and they're like, "Bro, what the fuck are you doing? Right? Stop doing that thing
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
you're going to anger a lot of people." It's basically like it. It's basically moral outrage, but in your head, like except you're
Right.
dreaming it. So
Yeah.
we've had that. Like that's basically my relationship. Like I grew up thinking about spirituality in the form of my relationship with the things around me, and that's personified uh, by the continuation of this tribe. It's quite fascinating. And then you go to Japan, and all of a sudden we go from like the forest to like 8 million gods or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a god for everything, literally everything,
Yeah.
which I think is cool. Um, how do I want to word this? Uh, like I feel specifically with Japanese culture, it's like every single tiny detail is of like an art form in itself. Like anything that you can do or that you can see is something like completely beautiful, like that stands on its own. And so I think the fact that people would want to like give sort of a like personality and like a relationship with everything, I think that like to me, that's just like the most beautiful thing because like for me when I was little, again, like people around me just are like, well, what's wrong with her? Like, she's so weird. And so when I was little, like just a really little kid, I was the same way. Like, and it, like, I don't know. I feel torn because it's like I'm autistic, so it's like, is this just why? But like, I would give like everything to me has like emotion. So if like my sister was like throwing a rock at a tree or something, I would be like, oh my God, don't do that. Like you're hurting the tree, you're hurting the rock. Or like my stuffed animals, it was always like really hard for me because I have like a favorite one, but then like all these other ones are just like, well, why don't I get to sleep in the bed with you? And so I did that when I was little. Like everything that I would see, like it was almost like it was human to me. Um, so the fact that in Japan there's a lot of that, um, I really resonated with that, especially like when I was there and got to experience it, because it makes every little thing that you do like there's like thought behind it and like a sense of awareness, and you really get to just kind of like connect with everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, adding emotion begets relationships or connection um,
Mm,
to an object. It's sort of like a synonym for breathing life into something, and you you recognize that the relationship between you and that item or object or event or moment is more precious now that you've added more emotion into it. Like
mhm,
um, when I was with an ex, a Japanese ex, and I stayed with the family. And sometimes the mother would tell me about things that Japanese people will believe in. And
mhm,
one time I was with her and I was the mother, and we were eating out somewhere, and she didn't want to finish her rice,
mm,
and the mother scolded her. It's like you should finish your rice, or not scolded, but more like urged her to finish the rice, even though she didn't want to. And I was kind of curious because I'm like, okay, well, I mean, you didn't really want to eat the rice. Why don't you just say no, right? And instead of saying the very standard reason of like not eating rice, or maybe you have a family who's very strict with like leaving food behind, or you should always take. And that's a very typical response. Her response to
mhm,
me was that people believe that there's a God in everything, and that means that a typical prompt by the parent to the child in Japan for when they don't finish their rice is that there's God in the rice, so you should finish it so as to not disrespect them.
mhm,
So not only was like kami, or like the concept of God or deities in general, um, respected, highly revered, it formed the basis for a religion or a way of living. It also formed the basis for the instruction of living, which is interesting, right? Like when you think about the instruction of living, it's formed in many different ways in different cultures, right? For a lot of us, it could be something like Christianity, and for others, it could be something like um, strict principles according to a culture. For them, they're just like, dude, there's like a Jesus in like every grave. You better eat it,
mhm.
or else like he's gonna smite you. He's gonna spank
The
your ass.
green Jesus.
Great Jesus. You imagine it,
Not
right?
trying to be disrespectful.
Like, imagine the grades are like crosses. They're like magnified crosses.
Oh my God. It's like your sign to eat it is like you look down and you see like two of them are crossed perfectly and you're like, shit, mom's right. Jesus is in there. Let's start wolfing down your rice. Did your parents or like grandparents or anyone have like a like an entity of sorts that like they threatened you with? Like when you were little, like if you were bad, like my mom, okay, bless my mom. I love my mom, but my mom came up with this like bad girl monster for me and my sisters. And so if we were like bad, like that's what she would threaten us with. And she came up with a story about how this like monster lived in like the drain of the bathtub. And like if we were like not listening, she would like put us in the bathroom with the light off and like tell us like the bad girl monster was like going to come
Like, go-
and like get us. And So I wondered, like, if you like with your like background, if there was anything like that with like in the tribe that they would like warn like kids about to like get you to behave.
Not that I've experienced that firsthand, because even if I'm Iban, I'm pretty much like a city Iban. I'm like an
Mm,
urbanized
yeah.
headhunter, I guess. The only thing I hunt is more alcohol. I mean, that's like the only thing. When it comes to like general, shall we say, personification of like a bad entity or like a bad monster, I not that anything comes to mind, but it's more like highlighting the consequences if you don't do something good. If you have a child that's growing up in a longhouse in the jungle, you're warned from like playing too much in the forest or else you disturb the spirits or something like that.
Mm,
Like kids are they start from they start from young in already believing these spirits already. Like
mhm,
the the absolute belief and acceptance of the supernatural, as opposed to say inventing a monster or like inventing like a
mm,
some kind of thing that would prevent you from um that's going to catch you and eat you or whatever if you do something bad. This is more like if you don't do this, the monkeys are going to tear you apart in the forest and you're going to be a shame for your family, right? You're going to dishonor your ancestors because the boars are going to like charge you while you're on the hunt or something like that. Or like it's like an anaconda or like a crocodile. Uh,
mm,
because like, those are the big ones, right? It's like uh uh boars, anacondas, crocodiles. Like those are already they're pretty monstrous already, and
right.
they exist. So you don't really need to like have him monster that is a creation.
Mm,
But on a more spiritual note, the supernaturalness is more on it's the highest priority is it stems from the ancestors. So
mhm,
anything that is relatively collective or would require or involve face, all of a sudden, the instruction of living from like a parent to the child would be said from the point of view of like, now listen, son, you're going to play with these toys, but you speak for the whole family and your ancestors if you're going to be playing with these toys. So you better get the fucking circle shaped toy into the circle shaped hole or else we're going to disown you. Like that sort of thing.
no
I mean,
pressure, yeah.
obviously not that exaggerated, but it's like that. Like all of a sudden the weight of one's words speaks of the different generations as opposed to saying a monster. But now that I think about it, we do have like zooming out at the tribe a little bit. We do have Malaysian monsters, demons,
Mm,
like trees that are forbidden. You should not touch them during sunset because that's when the spirits are most active. Yeah, they have like work hours. It's kind of weird. And other things, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff that's happening out there. It's more real, super
mhm.
real.
That's interesting. I love how like every place has its own like kind of stuff just based on their like culture and environment and everything.
Do you wanna hear? We're gonna be doing supernatural stuff, but do you want to hear like an actually happened a scary story?
Yeah.
It happened in the family, and it actually happened beginning of last year. So I have a cousin who is studying. I'm trying to word it so that he doesn't get outed. But I have a cousin
Mm,
who is studying in a different state in Malaysia, and he was finishing up his degree, whatever it is, and some kind of engineering degree. And it was a small break. He took a trip to go with two of his friends to go somewhere, just for a couple of days, and then he's gonna come back to the uni. So they go to this one area, and he likes to take pictures. So that you can see like on Facebook, there's a lot of pictures being taken, whatever. And let's call I'm gonna have to let's call this guy Chris, right? Let's just name him Chris. So Chris likes to take a lot of pictures, and he was with two of his friends, these two girls, and the three of them would be taking taking pictures, whatever. And they were nearby a beach. And near this beach it was low tide. Near this beach, at the end, right where the water started to recede, or like it's close to the water, there's this one lone tree. And he took a picture, and it was a great timing because a very pretty picture. He took a picture of this tree as the sun was setting.
Mhm.
After this trip, he went back. He went back to the uni and he stayed at the campus or whatever it is. And he stays with his little brother, so my other cousin. And all of a sudden, we lost contact with Chris.
Mhm.
And the only thing we hear is updates from the younger cousin. And the younger cousin has been telling their mom, so my aunt, that Chris has been acting really weird. He's starting to talk to himself more, and he's starting to become very violent and angry. And
Mhm.
sometimes sometimes, if I remember correctly, when he was telling me this, sometimes he would throw objects in one specific corner of the room, telling him to shut up, like in his words, like you should
Yeah.
shut up, like throwing it in one corner of the room. And he was like, "What is wrong? What is wrong?" So he freaked out and uh, called the mom, and then the mom came in, and it turns out that Chris started getting memory loss because he could not recognize his own mother,
Oh my god.
and he could only recognize his younger brother. But then he started blaming the younger brother for everything, and so the family was freaking out, and there's like family on his side as well, and then they're trying to figure things out. They had to bring him to the hospital, and he was hospitalized. He had to stay there for a while. They did an X-ray of his brain, and it turns out that there was this kind of strange white liquid that was growing in the middle of the forehead,
Yeah.
and it was making him get signs that are symptoms of memory loss and like getting close to dementia, a bit like
Yeah.
white matter lesion. I'm not sure for
Mm.
the medical listeners out there; they are aware of WML. I think it's white matter lesion. I think that's the correct term for it. Anyway, please don't quote me on that. So there's this growth that's been happening in the middle of his forehead, and he actually started to like forget his entire family. So every time that everyone was coming in to like feed him, bring him food, whatever, and try to visit to see him okay, he was like, I don't know who you are. So it was pretty heartbreaking. Um,
Mhm.
but to cut the story short, the uh, the doctors advised to do surgery where they take a laser and they what's the word for it? They pulverize, or like they completely destroy the liquid, the growth in the middle. And
Mhm.
in the end, he recovered. So it was at that point he remembered things again. He remembered his family, and um, I met up with him last year, and he's doing good. So that's actually
Mhm.
okay. Actually, earlier this year, so he's doing okay. He's a bit tired and exhausted, but he's doing okay. So
Mm.
that's fine. Now, the aunt is Ivan, completely superstitious. She lives in that longhouse, so
Yeah.
she's gonna be looking at this from a very animist perspective.
Yeah.
So she's like, "What did he do to capture or be possessed by whatever it is that was?"
Mhm.
And she was very adamant that it was some kind of spirit, ghost, or whatever it is. Um, and whenever you look at it from a very logical, scientific point of view, you can't really explain what it is. How do you
Mhm.
get a growth that grows in the middle of your forehead?
Mm.
So she looked at his Facebook and scrolled down and saw that picture of
Mm.
the tree with the sunset. And it turns out that's the exact same tree that you should not be close to during sunset,
Mm.
because that's when spirits and ghosts
Oh
will
my
come out.
god.
And
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, the name of the tree is called the Karak tree, which is Karak. I think that's the name.
Mhm.
The Karak tree. And it's basically a tourist spot for ghosts and shit. And he just got so close to it because he wanted to take one for the gram, and
Mhm.
it did a little bit too much high risk. But yeah, he's surviving now. And I tend to be very skeptical about this kind of thing. Uh,
Mm.
Even though my background is this kind of is related to this heavily, but I met him in person after he recovered. He's
Yeah.
he's a bit different now. So
Yeah.
it worried me. Like it worked.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's you know, as much as we're talking about this right now, like, there are a lot of stories here and there, and sometimes they're a lot closer to us than we think.
Right. Yeah. And those things are always like crazy to me. Those like unexplainable kinds of stuff. Because for me, like I don't particularly like swing like science is always right or spirituality is always right. I kind of like drift in the middle of ah, like anything is possible, like in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, so I love just hearing like both sides, but I do always find it amazing when like the science side of things, like they're just like, yeah, we don't fucking know. Like we don't know. We don't believe in that stuff, but like we can't tell you what happened. Or I always find it like I'm a person, I live very I do things really like based on my feelings. And um with like my nana, she was very like religious and like superstitious and things like that. And I think I don't know if she was first or second gen to come over to America, but um she would always, like tell us things like, oh, you have to be like mindful of like what you're thinking and how you look at people and things like that. Because, like in a lot of Mediterranean culture, and it's getting kind of mainstream now that more people are getting into like fucking crystals and witchcraft and shit. But in like my background, the like biggest thing that we have is like the evil eye. And so, my nana would always, like talk to us about that. And I just have a face, like I have a mean, like looking face. And so I would get like scolded by her a lot when I was little, like, "Oh, you need to like smile. You need to not look at people that way because you are going to like attract bad karma and bad things, like because you are looking at people with a mean face." I'm like, it's just my face. What do I do about it? But and so my mom was really similar where she, raised us like always listen, to your gut. Like if something is wrong, like your body will tell you. And so I get that way even like I like to go and just walk around in like the woods and stuff. And I don't know like if you've ever experienced anything like this, but like you're just kind of strolling and you're having a good time, but then just suddenly out of nowhere it just feels like very like ominous. And
Hmm.
you're like, oh shit, like I gotta like get out of this like situation. And then you leave and you're like feeling fine and you're just like, what the fuck was that? What the fuck was that? And I always think about like kind of like stuff that you were saying about where like, certain um places can be a bit like haunted or possessed or things. Like when I hear stories about houses, especially where like really bad things have happened, like murders and stuff like that. And then it's like any family that moves in there just starts like either they also suffer like some kind of big loss or like there's just crazy like haunting stories. All that stuff is fascinating to me.
Do you have like a sign or a symptom when you recognize that something is ominous? Because I have one, and it's very prominent. Like at first, I used to think that, oh, okay, I maybe it's because when I arrive at this place, I've heard stories of it being ominous, so I start to expect that, and then the tension rises. But I've had like the craziest moments will be when I get chills down my spine, which is, a phrase that we tend to use figuratively. But
Yeah.
I get like, when you're just walking about, you're going about your normal day and you suddenly get an ice cube on your skin. It's like that sudden
Yeah.
jab of cold. Like I have that actually from my lower back and it goes up to my brain. And
Mm,
when I get that feeling, I I actually go into like fight or flight mode because
yeah.
that's unnatural, ominous energy or karma or whatever the hell it could be. I don't know what power anime we're using here, but it's just like it's a little bit too much and it's freaking me out. But like that's
Mm,
my sign for
yeah.
ghost
I
shit.
feel I feel like a lot of stuff in my chest. So there's like levels of extremes for me. Like sometimes there's just kind of like that feeling of like being watched, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like for me, um when I was younger, I used to get like really into it. And if I started to feel like I was being watched, I would kind of like dance around the issue and try to be like, who's there? But I feel like when you do that, like you're just not inviting like good shit into your like environment. I feel that's not that's not the way to be. So now like if I have those feelings, I'll just kind of be like, oh, okay, observe it and then like leave it alone. As long as it doesn't feel like dangerous. But a lot of times, and again, a lot of these things happen to me like when I'm out just kind of like on my own exploring like the woods and stuff like that. And for me, like typically it's like out of nowhere. Like my whole body will like freeze, like I'll just like stop walking and then I'm like, oh shit. Like you realize like your kind of body acts without you like realizing. And so I'm like, oh, why did I stop? And then I'll feel like in my chest, like you said, kind of like that fight or flight thing where I'm like something is wrong here. And then it kind of like goes throughout like my whole body and I kind of like slowly am like, okay, I need to probably change directions and not like keep walking this way because there's probably nothing good to be had from that.
No, God,
Mm.
it freaks me
Yeah,
out
yeah.
when it happens.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
creeps me out. I had a version of that actually in Kyoto, when I went to one of the shrines. When I went there to visit, I was part of a group, and then I was the last person back at the group, and we were going through like a lot of Tori shrines, so like those
Mhm.
red gates, the Tori shrines, and I every all of my friends were in front of me, and I was just walking behind him. I think I was just taking my time, just going back, and then I had that chill, and then I looked behind me, and there was nobody, and then I was like, okay, I think I should go, so I just kept going, and then I had another chill, like another 15 steps later, and I looked behind me, and then there was no one there, and I was like, I think I should go faster. I think that's a sign that he's telling me to get out, right? And I just like quickly left. It
Right.
was it was insane. Maybe when we were staying in Japan, there was that slight tinge of supernaturalness. Maybe not in Tokyo itself, but more like in the micro moments. Um, because as much as I've seen things like demons or yokai, which is going to be
Mhm.
something that we can totally riff off of, um, I rarely saw that in the general day to day routines with people. But when it came to like tourist mode, when we're actually going somewhere, that's when you're like, okay, there's probably like some spiritual element here, or like, okay, there's some demon shit behind that wall over there that I should not touch.
Have you ever had like kind of the opposite where you're like attracted to like something that you probably shouldn't be? Like for me, I went to visit some friends in Kyoto and um I don't know what the fuck we were on, but we were like it was like middle of the night and we were like, let's go like to the deer park in Nara.
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Oh, can you, like, go there in the middle of the night?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, it's not like a place that's closed off that you, like, get entry in. It's like you can just go." And I was like, "Alright, okay." And so we went in just the middle of the night, and all the deer are, like, off, like, hiding. There's, like, 1 or 2 that were seen, like, kinda walking around.
They're in the izakayas. It's the salary deer
And
just like fucking off.
and so, I see this, like, trail or whatever, and it's completely dark, and I'm like, "Oh, let's go down there." And friends are like,
What?
Holly, no, like that's not a good idea. Like it's dark, like there's no lights." And I'm like, like we have our phones, like it's fine." And so they are humoring me and we're walking and I'm excited. Like, despite all my surroundings, I'm like, yeah, where are we going? And my friends are kind of like looking around and they're like, "Oh, Holly, like, look, if you take your phone, like, light and you shine it over, you see like millions of little shiny eyeballs because like all the deer are out there like hiding and they're all like staring at you. And it's all you can see is just the reflection of like their glowing eyes." And so, Micah, was like, no, like, fuck this. Like, we're going back. But I was like, no, like, let's go. Like, let's go. Like, let's go over there. Like, let's go see them. And they're like, these deer are going to eat us. Like, we need to leave now. But I remember like walking away feeling like really disappointed because I was like, I wanted to see like what all that was about.
Hey, demons, it's your boy here to hang out with you.
Here to get possessed. No, I feel like in Tokyo, and again, not to sound like a complete freak, but like in Tokyo, I felt a lot of my um feelings, um, gut instinct, so to speak, involved like people rather than places.
Right.
Um, like you could walk by someone random on a street and be like, "Ooh, like that's bad." Like you don't even know them, but for me, it's like I'll get that feeling like, no, that's not good. Or even vice versa, where I've had interesting experiences in Japan, um, where someone random will come up and like talk to me and have like some really like interesting conversation that is just like information that like I needed to hear for like whatever I was going through in life. And then like they're just gone. Like I had a lot of those experiences, like meeting very calming people that just came and like made me feel better for a minute and then they just vanished from my life. So in Tokyo specifically, like I had those sort of maybe like what's the word that I want? Spooky sort of like interactions with like people rather than the environment that I was in.
Hmm. I think I've had those myself. There's like not as many, shall we say, fleeting interactions with people that
Mhm.
you bring in. Um, the spooky stuff tends to be when I intentionally go away from the city and into some like other prefecture or like some other state. It's basically like I'm like a Ghostbuster. I'm like literally Googling for like interesting places that just happens to be full of, demons and shit like that.
Searching for it.
Just because I'm all about the history. No, I'm all about that. It's interesting seeing the disconnection there because
Mm,
you rarely notice it. And only until you intentionally seek these traditional places. For me, they tend to be temples. Temples tend to be
yeah.
these places for meditation, and they've lasted for hundreds of years. And a lot of the the tiling, the foundation, the restorations, the pillars, the carvings, they've been active for hundreds of years. It honestly, it really amazes me. And although this is not really like maybe it's spiritual related, it is amazing that we can see carvings on a temple that were the same. Like these are the carvings that people from 400 years ago have seen.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. And barring the spirit stuff, it's just fascinating that you can bring like a lot of history into the architecture, into the design, etc. But of course, that has to come with something that we can consider as intangible concepts, like the supernatural, the underworld, the overworld, and also people's imaginations. Because
Yeah.
when it comes to trying to imagine like a demon or a monster or a nightmare or a paralysis demon or whatever it is in Japan, there's like a whole variety of it. Like there's like a bajillion of
Yeah.
it. It's you can fling yourself into a world of like different demons, and there's pretty much one for every vice in the world. It's pretty interesting.
Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? I actually don't. I actually don't. There's a few that come to mind, but I don't have like a leaderboard or like top 10.
An like S rank
Yeah, I don't have
tier
like a
list.
yeah, a tier
We
list.
should do a tier list.
We should do it. Actually, you know what?
We
We should
should do
we should do a tier list. Yeah, you should do a tier
write
list
that
actually.
down.
Yeah, okay. You know what? Let me write it down. Let's see if we can bring it up, make it up on the fly. Okay, tier list for each
On the
guy. Okay, so the first one that comes to mind, I don't know if this is gonna be S or A. This is definitely up there. There's this I don't know if you know the story behind how is it earthquakes or tsunamis are made? Do you know about that? Um the demon that creates these earth shaking, earth shattering tremors is a giant catfish.
Ooh.
Yeah. So if let me just try and find it. Giant catfish yokai. Okay. So it is a onamazu, and it is a grotesque catfish, and it creates just giant earthquakes. Like okay. Quote, okay, this is from yokai.com because definitely the definite source, the resource for all
Oh,
things
no,
Japanese themed.
this person's legit. I've looked at they like have a book and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. So,
need to-
so if everyone interested in listening to this episode, reading with us. Okay. I'm on yokai.com/onamazu. That's with 2 O's. Okay. And quote, when these monstrous fish get excited, they shake the earth with their violent thrashing, causing devastating earthquakes in the areas near where they live. It sounds like me when I ate like chili. I'm like, I would like thrash the entire house because I'm shitting so much. Because first of all, the fact that someone like like a Japanese person is like, "Hey, there's a lot of earthquakes. What's making that?" And then he just looks at the water and there's a catfish and he's like, what if it's that but times a million in size or like in scale? Yeah, that sounds about right. And everyone is like, oh, 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 so this. Oh, oh, hi, hi. And everyone just went hi. And then like everybody just accepted it. Like, that's amazing. So first of all, for me, high up on the tier list already, giant catfish makes earthquakes.
It just makes me think of. Did you ever watch Lilo and Stitch,
A long time
the
ago.
like
But
Disney
yeah.
movie?
Yeah.
It's one of the best movies. Well, they did like a little TV series of it, for like Disney Channel, where like all there's like a bunch of different experiments, and one of them was like it made earthquakes. It just makes me think of that. And he's just running around smacking his tail, causing chaos throughout Hawaii.
Do you have a favorite? Or do you have one in mind that we can add to the tier
The
list?
only thing that I have in mind is what we were talking about before we started recording,
And
and
God.
that is the Shirime. And I was like trying to look because I was like, I've seen this picture so many times, but I've never actually looked up what does it do? Like, is it like, and so same thing, like yokai.com. What is this person's name? I used to know his name, the like owner of this. But anyway, it's beautiful. All your yokai information you can
With a shout out, yeah, give a shout out to the founder of Yokai. I'm gonna have a try and find the owner of it. But yeah,
yeah, they have a Patreon and everything. Um, but the like literal kind of like translation of that is just like but I, like Shiri and May, like the kanji for but, kanji for I. And so it's like behavior story is just Shiri May approaches travelers on the road late at night looking like a man wearing a kimono. Once it has their attention, it asks them if they have a moment to spare. But before they can answer, the Shirime drops its kimono to the ground and bends over, spreading its butt cheeks and revealing the giant shiny eye located inside of its butthole. Other than its very startling behavior, Shirime do not do anything harmful. It appears to thrive solely on the joy of scaring people.
it's just a flasher.
It is. But like a butthole, like I don't know how, like what I would do if someone just like on the street jumped down in front of me and like spread their ass cheeks and just like I'm just looking like dead in their butthole. Like how do you? Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to react to that. There's lots of like yokai that I find particularly like interesting. Like kitsune stories are always really cool. Like fox gods and stuff. Um, there are stuff that they do. I don't know if there's like a yokai per se, but I like the stories with like wolves and things with Japan because apparently like no wolves are in Japan now. So sometimes in stuff that I watch, they're used in a very kind of like spiritual sense. Or there's lots of stories about how the wolves actually became people. Um, and that's just how they're like blending into the world now. So little stories like that I always think are pretty interesting that tie in more like humanness to things that
Yeah.
we would otherwise find like otherworldly.
I actually know about that, about wolves not being in Japan anymore. I thought they would be because I thought that there would be still some like wolf dog hybrids, like different types of like Shiba Inu family, etc. up in the north for Hokkaido. I thought they were like hunting dogs next to Ainu people, but I might be wrong. But that's actually a good point. Like
Mm,
I noticed that um Kitsune, Tengu and
Tengu.
Kappa are, some of the most, shall we say, mainstream celebrity yokai out there. That's some A-list shit.
Mm.
Like as soon as someone sees a picture, they're like, okay, we know who that is, or we know
What's
what
the
that
one?
is.
The freaking like Tanuki.
Oh, Tanuki?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
Tanuki.
raccoon.
Those are like in a lot of like stories and stuff too. And I remember actually seeing one in Ikebukuro once, but I didn't know what it was. And I just looked like a dumbass, first of all, because nobody else saw it. And so, what was it? Was it Shinamachi that was the dorm that was actually like in Ikebukuro?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was hanging out with the kids from that dorm, and we were walking in from the dorm to like go to the store to like buy more alcohol. And so, I'm already drunk. So, it probably didn't like help my case. But as we're walking, I'm like, you know me, I'm always just kind of like looking at shit. And so we're walking and we go by this like alley and over like the like wires is this like creature walking. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Because I'd never seen one before. And I'm like, the fuck is that? And everyone like keeps walking. I'm like, you guys, like, what the fuck is this? And so like they come over, they're like, what are you talking about? But then by then it's like gone. You're seeing its like tail like go over like the building it got onto. And I'm like, it was like this thing. Like, are there raccoons here? And they're like, no, Holly. Like, America is at the center of the world, Holly. Oh, and and I'm like, but like, but it kind of looked like that, but also like kind of like a cat. Like, I don't know what it was, but like I saw this thing and everyone was just like, yeah, okay. And so for like the rest of my time, like I feel like this took me like my like months on my own search of like just Googling like random animal parts and trying to find like what I saw because I was like, I know what I saw. And then finally, like I come across like this like Tanuki and I'm like, oh, that must have been it.
Yeah.
It's like I'm pissed.
They do come out. Like they are out there. I've seen a few for sure. I just find it funny that I like how the Shinamachi people are just dismissing you so fast. They're just like, this isn't America. Like,
Not everything revolves around you. Fuck, okay.
American Tanukis. Okay. We don't have those here.
You're good old raccoon.
I do have like one that has popped up multiple times throughout my life in terms of just being heard about it the first time whenever we think about like demons from Japan. And that's Yuki Onna, which is the
Oh yeah.
snow woman, or like,
Mhm.
the tale of the woman who is like, what was it? Like, um, has to hide their true form, and then marry someone, but then promises them not to see the true form or something like that, and then you just
Yeah.
lose them, etc. Um, I think that's right. Either that or it's like some witch that. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm mixing two stories. One is a crane that became a woman that married a man who saved the crane's life ages ago, and then the
Mhm.
man saw the crane in the true form, and then the crane had to leave. Another is Yuki Onna, which is actually more scary. It's basically some like mountain thought that's like that exists in winter, and as soon as she sees you, you're gonna be dead meat. Because oh, I have the description here on yokai.com. So shout outs to the owner is Matthew Meyer. So shout outs to Matthew. Maybe I don't know, we can get him on the show. I mean, that'd be pretty sick, actually, if that could work. So here's a quote by their A quote on the appearance from Yokai.com. Quote, Yuki Onna prey on travelers lost in the heavy snowstorms that blanket the Japanese Alps in winter. They have an otherworldly beauty with long black hair and dark piercing eyes. Their skin is ageless and as white as snow, but their bodies are as cold as ice. A mere touch is enough to give a human a deep, unshakable chill. They feed on life force, sucking it from humans' mouths with an icy breath that freezes their victims solid. End quote. Now, first of all, a a a pale Instagram model tonguing me to death doesn't seem like it's a bad way to go. But I have to say that when you're like a weary traveler, like running through a snowstorm, and then the last thing you see is like a hot chick, like wanting to kiss you to death, it's kind of scary, actually, because it's like, oh, it's a human, but then you touch their skin, and all of a sudden they are just unbearingly, like unbearably cold. Oh god, that actually scares the shit out of me.
And I'm gonna go on a little gender studies a little spiel here. But I always kind of wonder when I'm like hearing these stories, like, because I feel oftentimes um, women in this kind of stuff are always represented as these like cunning sort of like tricksters that are gonna like catch men off guard and like kill them or deceive them somehow. And so I wonder a lot like where these stories came from. I feel in a lot of spirituality and in religion, like women often kind of get like the short end of the stick. And um I don't know, they're just perceived as these like awful things. There's actually this really good episode, like I can't remember how much I can remember of it, but that show on Netflix, like Love, Death and Robots, I think that's the order.
Yeah.
There's a really good episode about these people who would hunt excuse me, like the fox spirits. And the fox spirits were always like female. And so it was said like they would seduce men and then like kill them. And a human like little boy befriends like another like one of the fox like children. His dad like kills their mom. And so he like feels guilty, and him and the little fox girl kind of like grow up together. And then she goes off into the world and like into like human form and stuff, but it's still just like men being like nasty and miserable to her. And I don't know. That was a really like pretty like the art was really nice and the story was really good. And that kind of made me start thinking like about like how these stories originated. Like, did some traveler just stumble upon some lady that he couldn't have his way with, and so he was like, "Ah, ice queen, bitch," or what's actually going on there?
I've always thought of it as cultural reflection because the origin of that story reflects during the time that it was created, the culture at the time. So power distance and gender hierarchy within Japanese culture was so adamant that men had these roles and then women had these roles. So for women to have more power within that context, it would mean things like, I guess, feminine traits, sex appeal, maybe cunning, intelligence to a certain degree. But then men was more on power and greed and in positions of being able to lead people.
Mm.
So when trying to define masculinity and femininity, the traits are so distinct that the narratives for tales and origins and lore and also cultural history can also reflect that because that is the lens from which they see people. At least that's how I see it, right? Because
Good
otherwise,
way to look at it.
yeah, otherwise we'd be seeing snow men as well, right? Like
Um,
or like hot buff dudes in the winter
a hot
using
waterfall daddy.
summer dad
I'm gonna make my own yokai.
hot. Hot waterfall daddy.
Always meditating under the waves of the waterfall as the coursing river reflects off his muscles.
Hot waterfall. Anyone hashtags us with hashtag hot waterfall daddy. We're gonna give you a shout out when the episode is the next episode coming up because just the thought of it is just
I want to see no, I want to see like fan art. I want to see someone draw like Hot Waterfall Daddy for me.
hot waterfall daddy as a yokai.
Yeah,
Can we
as a
get Matthew
yokai.
Meyer to draw hot waterfall daddy? Or
Draw like a picture like above my desk, like just looking down on me.
yeah, but that's supposed to make you scared, not make you feel like,
No,
stir your inner chakras and shit.
he's a seducer. So it's like just as the women yokai like bring men in to their unbeknownst demise, it's like if you're just a female walking through like the forest, you're feeling a little parched. So you go to the river and there's just this hot waterfall daddy. And then you're like, hell yeah. And then he drowns you. That can be the caution of the tale.
Oh, no. Now I miss butt eye. I miss hot waterfall daddy. Now that I think about it, are there like gay demons? Is there such a thing?
Um,
Is it like what if
I'm
like a
sure
Yuki Onna preys on women? Or
I'm sure there absolutely are because like and again, a lot of my stuff comes from like how I grew up thinking about spirits based on like Greek mythology. But like the gods are fucking,
yeah, yeah.
like especially in like Greek lore.
Guts
And
people.
even in like actual Greek history and stuff, it's like orgies and all of that. And like sexuality wasn't so split up. Like guys could fuck guys and then it didn't need a label. Girls could hook up with girls or in so many cultures they don't even put like a sex label onto someone. Like you won't even have male, female as a separate thing. So I feel like when it comes to things like if you're a god and you're a deity or whatever, like you're not playing by human rules. Like you're gonna do whatever the fuck you want. If Yuki Ono wants like some babe, some female babe, I'm sure. I'm sure. But it's like as you said, in the times it's not like many like women were out traveling in the snowy mountain like by themselves. So
Yeah, you would think that like I mean, what's the likelihood of women passing by a waterfall? And then from there, what's the likelihood of like them seeing like a hot dude meditating and being like, oh my God, can we please? And I'm like,
right place, right time.
yeah, it does make sense. Like, no, I mean, when I was thinking of like a custom yokai, I was just thinking more of just animals that shouldn't be there, like flying fish or like, like a land animal that's in the water, like monkeys of the ocean or something like that. Um, because most of the time, it, what scares me the most, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, like if there's a demon that would scare me the most, it would be first of all, it has to be one that doesn't make any sense, and then second of all, it has to be one where um it has to be one where the fear is what fuels them or makes them more powerful.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
right?
those
Things like,
things.
yeah. So like, Yuki Onna, like I'm reading the lore here and we can't really confirm if this is true because I've never met a Yuki Onna before. And if I have, then you're not going to see me anymore in the show because I might be dead. Um, but, there are interactions where Yuki Onna, some of them are not entirely cold blooded, pun. They can fall in love, right? They can be married, etc., but you can never declare, who they are. Uh,
Mhm.
so that means that there has to be some level of human common sense embedded in that. Like some demons can
Mhm.
be negotiated with, right? Like
Mhm.
the worst for me is meeting with a demon that I cannot communicate with,
Mm,
because once, like, we've built civilization to put ourselves away from the jungles, the savannas, the mountains, to put ourselves as the apex predators, right?
right.
To unify ourselves in a way where if one person, a human being by themselves is weak against like lions and tigers, etc., but then put together, we have our collective brains and all of a sudden we can, conquer the whole world. But if you suddenly are put in a situation where you meet a demon that you cannot touch because they're supernatural, and then you cannot communicate with because they're not human, then you are more or less the same as like an insect in the jungle, because
Mm,
you just have no power at all. And that scares the living shit out of me. Like that's like almost Lovecraftian to that point.
that's so interesting to me because we're we're so different in our like ideas on that. Because when I'm reading about like spirituality and stuff like that, people write a lot about that. On like the human desire to be, as you said, sort of this like apex thing. We separate ourselves so much from what is actually natural. Like everything about humans is completely unnatural. Like if you really look at it, there is nothing natural about like what we do and how we live. But we think that's natural. So we perceive everything else as lesser than because we've created our own reality, so to speak. But for me, I find, I don't know, like I kind of like if I were to bump into this thing that I could not like communicate with, that doesn't particularly like frighten me. Like the thought of that doesn't disturb me. I think I would have like the like flight or flight response because that's just natural where you're like, oh shit, I'm probably gonna like die. Anytime we encounter something new, we have that sort of instinct to be like wary of it. But when I think about these scenarios, I don't feel like anything about them. If anything, it kind of like excites me. Like to meet something that, in my opinion, would be like the most natural thing. Like if there are spirits and things like that out there, that seems like the most natural thing in the world to me. That even if I was about to like be consumed, like I don't know, that's kind of like a hell of a way to go out to just see like this thing that is so much more than like what I could ever be. So
You
we're
have
kind of
very
opposite.
you have a very interesting fascination with the supernatural at that point. I mean, of course, I would always default to saving myself, because I have an inherent fear and have the desire to survive. But it is interesting though, because many people have tried to make communications with spiritual
Mm,
elements, right? We have like seances, or we have um, rituals that include, blessing the house or ridding it of evil spirits. Like we have a few of those in the tribes
mm,
on Borneo Island. Um, there's another tribe on the island where they handle black magic or like voodoo magic.
mm.
So
Yeah.
that includes like, voodoo dolls of like people, and then those are curse items. And or they have shamans that actually like rid you of spirits. It's quite a, like, as much as we think about either fascination or fear with the supernatural, it's a safe bet to say that it has such an inherent effect on our livelihood that
Mm,
it should never be fully ignored. Uh,
mhm.
I don't know if I can even control my response if I ever meet like a Yukiona
Yeah.
or like a giant catfish that's gonna like earthquake my ass. Uh,
Mhm.
but I have a feeling that it is gonna be an interesting one, because then you realize, at least for me, the very first thing that will come to my head is, all of my experiences, all of my understandings, the theory, reading about this, whatever, will just amount to nothing, because I'll just be mortal human being that's going to be killed, right? Like I'm just going to be like, I'm just so easily discarded because this bitch knows how to control snow. And I'm like, shit. And like, I don't know what to do about that. I don't have,
And if
I
she's hot, would you be scared even if she was like a babe?
am not, I'm not traveling the mountains to slay puss. Like, first of all, like, I mean, to be fair, if she's like super hot, that's a good way to go. But, but according, according to my calculations, the skin is really cold, and I don't know that's going to be a fun experience if stuff happens. Um, and she's trying to feed my life force. I'm trying to get something else, right? Like before I die. So there's a little bit of conflict in what we want from each other, and that kind of relationship will always end in failure. And in this case, it's my death. Now, there's a whole website to this, like yokai.com. There's
Mm,
many different kinds of creatures, demons, etc. They take many different shapes. Like compared to Malaysia, a lot of ours tends to be very human or personified
mm,
related, as opposed to here, it tends to be, it comes in various shapes and forms and even scales and sizes.
yeah.
And even, you know, your eyes on your ass. I mean, like no Malaysian's ever gonna invent that and then make that be part of our nation. So I mean, props to the Japanese for having the creativity to put an eye on her butthole. And
Right.
now I'm curious about like how do people view that or how that plays a part in their lives. Because I've been trying to think about that from years ago. Like all of this is like yokai from centuries. And
Yeah.
these tend to be the default children's tales or stories to help shape someone to be a specific kind of person. And now I'm thinking, is it healthy to have such an expansive world of demons and buttholes and everything? Like, does that help serve a country? Or actually, maybe that's a bit too big. But like, do you think it helps the person to know more or a lot about these things?
I think in general, when it comes to knowledge, any kind of knowledge, it depends on how you perceive that and what you do with it. Um, what is that? That whole like knowledge is power kind of thing. Like there are, I think, lots of people, and again, this would go into a psychological thing that I have no understanding of, and probably no one does. But everybody takes information and processes information differently. And so I'm sure there are people who maybe have like a fascination with this and they kind of go in a way that we would perceive as being a little like crazy, where it would probably hinder their life more than help it if you're constantly walking around and you're stressed about all these different things. But if you're more neutral and your community is raising you and it's like, oh, we have this tree god, and through this tree god you should be learning how to be generous and be kind and not shit on nature and stuff like that, then those I think are like helpful things, whether or not you grow up and you necessarily believe that there is a tree god. You still have exposure to these kinds of moral beliefs that are more for like the greater good. And I would say, in my opinion, I'm not particularly like religious or anything. I wouldn't categorize myself as any of that. So to me, when I look at religion, um, for me, that's all that should really be. It's just it should be moral teachings that make you want to be a good person, not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of everyone. Um, so I think with this kind of stuff and spirituality and religion, whatever, it it really depends on how you're going to interpret that and put it into your own life. Like a lot of people take these things in a very selfish way and twist and construe them, and they can do some very fucked up shit with that. Mm.
Fucked up shit. Put a trademark on that. I've seen
Yeah,
it a lot.
fucked up
Especially when religion is then used as an excuse for things
atrocities.
like, yeah, atrocities, oppression, uh,
Mhm.
the imposement of oneself onto another.
Uh-huh.
Even if a lot of religions, encourage respect between each other, but then all of a sudden people tend to skip that page. Apparently, I
Right,
know it's a
right.
part of the holy text, but the people are like, no, everybody needs to
Then
know.
suddenly your god wants you to kill someone else because their god is slightly different than your god.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
shit doesn't make sense to me.
It sounds a little bit too convenient in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
God isn't like that. God isn't picky. You're supposed to be
yeah,
like overarching, helping with the human race, etc., and all that sort of thing.
yeah.
And it almost makes me think, like when I was thinking about this, it made me wonder about whether or not I can just invent my own God. Can I just be my own, my
There is
own?
a pasta god, so
Yeah,
you absolutely can. Like, legally, I don't know completely how that works. I think there's, like a standard set of like criteria that you have to meet. I don't know about in Malaysia, but I feel like in America there is. But I'm sure if you could like build some sort of following, even if it didn't become, what is it, like a sanctioned religion where they recognize it at like a legal level, I'm sure you could at least have some sort of cult rising.
yeah, like I think that'd be cool actually. Like to have my own. I'm not gonna say cult, but like beliefs. Um,
No.
maybe they are personified in some way. Like, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster has been a very prevalent rising religion.
What
They
are
have
they
their own
called? Like
church,
the
Pastafarians.
Pastafarians?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pastafarians. And I think their national, like their official clothing or item of choice is a colander on their head. So like
Mhm.
some followers of the religion, they have their driver's license, and then they have to wear the colander on their head, and they're like, no,
Mhm.
this is a religious outfit. I must wear it because it's part of the law. So it's actually a real thing. Um, but I'm pretty sure they're not recognized in Malaysia. So for our Pastafarian listeners out there, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can practice your religion here, but I'd be happy to have you over to the house so we can learn your teachings. Like I was just thinking about it, like the most immutable form of wisdom for every religion is kindness and or
Mhm.
unity and harmony between people. Uh,
Mhm.
how it's articulated differs by a religion, but then
Yeah.
how it's interpreted differs via the individual. So some people take
Yeah.
it to extreme levels, and some people take it to just a standard. Oh, that's what he's saying. But then some people are like, oh no, we must kill this kind of person, or we must
Uh-huh.
go on a crusade, or whatever the hell it is. Um, in Japan, for Shintoism, a lot of the Japanese friends that I have, they it doesn't seem like there is that level of Shintoist influence. It's either not explicitly stated or it's embedded in the teachings that they have growing up, just from like certain behaviors that are encouraged, like
Mhm.
making sure you finish your rice, making sure you're always, early, etc. Or not being out for too late, or else there's a yokai that's gonna, show their butthole, and you're gonna be like, oh my god, that's disgusting. Ew, my eyes.
Mhm.
Um, and it makes me think to a conversation I've had with a friend who is the daughter of a caretaker for a shrine. So is she has a responsibility to take care of the shrine that her father is currently heading. And she would tell me about these things. Sometimes people, the extent of people's faith in Shintoism, at least for people in Tokyo, only extend to the holidays and or the certain routines where people just go in and just pray for a little bit. It's not
Mhm.
as prevalent. Like you don't see people holding crosses or, religious items everywhere,
Yeah.
akin to Shintoism. It's only within the temple grounds. And then once they're outside, it's just, oh, I'm just a city person. So I think like people know their borders really well, at
Yeah.
least from how I see it.
And Japan is a really interesting in how they go about like religion and stuff in general because they pick and choose things um, from various stuff. Like you have your Buddhist aspects, you have your Christianity aspects, you have your Shinto. Those are kind of like the big three, I would say. Not that there isn't like other stuff. And I feel personally like I feel like that's a smart way to go about practicing religion and spirituality. Um, I think a lot of problems kind of get created when we want to like label things in categories. And so when people are able to look into everything and find the good aspects of everything and embody that, I think that is what makes like a good, like well-rounded person and a well-rounded culture because you're not just saying like here in America, for example, it's like it's weird because I don't think even I wouldn't say people are particularly even like religious here anymore. But politically, it's very much like be a good Christian, even though like church and state aren't supposed to be a thing. And so it's like if you are Christian or someone else identifies as something else, then they're un-American. Or like you are allowed to have a problem with this person because they don't believe what you believe. Whereas when you grow up and you're exposed to all these different things and you're taught that in a very sort of neutral and accepting way with like, oh, this tradition has X, Y, and D. This tradition has X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. This is where they overlap, and here are some differences. And you get to make your own decisions on what you think is like moral for you. I feel like in general, you can look at everything in that way. Like, it's not like, oh, why would this person want to be Catholic instead of Christian? Like, what the hell? It's like, oh, that person chooses to like label as Catholic, whereas this person chooses to label as Christian. And these are like the like moral precepts that they have with that. Okay, that's cool. Like the label doesn't really matter, you know? It's like who you are as a person.
Yeah, that tends to be highly observed, in a few other places as well.
Mm.
The I don't know if it's the need to have an enemy or if it's that recognizing that someone is different from you is a threat to your own belief,
Mhm.
as if like that must be like not that that's a possible like not that that is not a possibility. It could be right, like if it's too drastic, whatever it is. But then the fact that it's the conclusion, like always, it's what worries
Yeah.
me, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, if I'm actually Christian, like I'm Anglican, and so I'm all about the Jesus. So, uh, uh, like it's not like I go out of my way to meet someone in Malaysia, and we're predominantly Muslim. Go out of my way to meet someone who is Muslim and who is also a great person, and then they just somehow you know they are Muslim. Therefore, I conclude that they're a threat or they um they are against my thoughts or something along those lines. That is an incredibly foreign concept. It's
Mhm.
as if my my ego is heavily embedded in my beliefs,
Mhm.
and any any meandering of that is considered an insult, which is I don't know if that is derived from environments that have had very complex religious histories, right? Because the US is a very complex one for sure. But
Yeah.
Malaysia as well. So, I'm not saying that we're all good guys here, like Malaysia as well. And, many other places around the world. Japan, I don't see that that much. People have just silently accepted the various religions. People have just silently accepted that. Um, there's a growing Muslim population as well. I think there are a few YouTube videos, documentaries of Japanese Muslims that are sharing their day to day routine, and there are a few mosques building up. Um, I we have a few we had a few Muslim students in our Asakare dorm, and I would go have lunch with them or something sometimes, and we had to be very careful about where we eat because they can't eat pork, right? So that's hard.
Right.
So I think when I was asking them like, "Oh, how are you handling that, right? How are you handling those principles or those beliefs that you have to adhere to?" And they're like, "It's okay. We just have to be more careful about where we eat. That's fine." The only trouble or the only issue is when they have to explain why they cannot eat it at
Yeah.
a restaurant where where the cuisine or your eating behaviors in Japan, they have never heard of a restriction like we don't eat pork at all. Um,
Hmm.
because it's not like in Shintoism, I'm pretty sure there's no food that you're not allowed to eat. I've never heard of that until now.
Hmm.
Like, is there one? No, not $20. You can eat anything you want, I think, in Japan. So that's actually okay.
Drink a lot of sake.
Yeah, you just drink a lot as well. Like, I mean, they have everything. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty hedonistic society. So, like they're gonna eat and drink everything. Whereas there are other religions with other restrictions. Just doesn't exist that much, right?
Mhm.
Even in Christianity, some branches, some sects have restrictions on food. So you do have to worry about that. In Japan, I just don't see that. Like, to be honest, that's sort of freeing to a certain degree. Uh, the shall we say, the shaping of the person comes from just other factors. But in the case of spirituality, it's quite a wide spectrum. So I'm quite happy about that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in Japan, and I don't have an answer to this issue, but I was writing a paper about it um, the last term, I think, where I was looking into um, kind of how society and religion like relate and how society contributes to the formation of like radical cults. And um, because in Japan, that's one of the things that you'll hear about, at least for us, like when we were going to go like study and stuff, like you got to be careful of the cults. They'll try to, like recruit you. And so since I started grad school, I've been looking kind of into the non-traditional like religions that are like popping up in Japan. And one that I was looking into mostly last term was like Om. And Om, people may or may not like know in like 1995, they, not they, it wasn't even the whole group. It was like like a select small group of people amongst the whole practice who went out and they released sarin gas into the Tokyo subway. Um, and a lot of people, like got sick and died and stuff. And so now that is what like Ulm is known for. So the people that are registered as part of this group, they actually have a really hard time in society. Like they can't find jobs, they can't rent places, things like that. They're very highly discriminated against. Um, which you know, in a general like surface level thing, you think that makes sense. Like, oh, this group of people did something very bad, so we should like shame them, so to speak. But how I was like thinking about this was like, okay, but where does like society and the government, have to kind of draw a line somewhere? Like, Japan can be very discriminatory, um, not only in terms of like religion, but race and economic standing and stuff like that. Um, so I think it is a little difficult to say, like, is Japan really like all that accepting of different like religions and practices, or are we just seeing sort of the surface of it? Like if you can go over there and you can be like, oh yeah, Shintoism, Buddhism, a little bit of Christianity, like, you'll be fine. But there are even issues of like uh I've heard some stories of like people from India. It's like they get in trouble or can't find homes because people don't want to smell their cooking. Like that's part of their culture, like very rich spices and things like that. Um, People don't want to rent to them because they don't, want to deal with that, or they, since like a lot of things, like Muslims in general get a harder rep in a lot of places. Um, so when like people find out like, oh, you're practicing this, it's like they also don't get like rented to or accepted as well. So with Japan, I don't really want to say like they're necessarily accepting, but I do feel like on a surface level they have less issues than what I see in other countries.
Maybe the levels of discrimination are more implicit or
Mm,
on a deeper level. So they're not as, shall we say, they're not as highlighted as
yeah.
other cultures. Like in Malaysia, it's also the same. Like we had this case in Malaysia where um the we had either a Bahasa Malaysia or an Iban translation of the Bible, and
Mm,
it was being shared across churches in Sarawak in East Malaysia. And in that translation, God was depicted using the word Allah, right?
mm,
Uh, Now, Allah in Bahasa Malaysia means God, but then you also have Allah, which is the word for for Allah, like the God as depicted in the Quran, which is in Islam. So those are two gods, two entities in two specific contexts, but because they were said specifically the same, that led to a lot of conflict for a majority of the not majority, but uh, the Muslim community, where they felt that this was a threat to their religion. Um,
mm,
and of course, not all share that opinion, but there was a
right.
growing concern. The number of voices increased, and there was a group that was actually, quite vocal about that. And that actually led to someone committing arson and burning like six
Oh,
churches
wow.
in Malaysia in retaliation against this translation, which is insane,
Mhm.
right? Like we have this for some reason, um, spirituality equals ego to a number of people who
Mhm.
who I don't want to say lack, but shall we say, who have a minimum or an average level of emotional capacity to dissociate the two,
Yeah.
whereby you are not your spiritual beliefs, you are yourself, and then you have your spiritual
Mhm.
beliefs, right? Someone who has different
Mhm.
beliefs does not equate to them making fun of you, right? Like just because I think
Right.
of something differently doesn't mean I'm calling you an asshole, right? Like it's like that.
Right, right.
But for some reason, we're seeing that all over the world. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I guess we just have different ways of articulating that frustration or discrimination. In Japan,
Mhm.
we have those. In Malaysia, it's the same as well. Uh, and in other countries, I'm sure um, it's going to be like that.
Mhm. Pretty much everywhere you go. There's, like, a lot on the issue that I don't feel, like, comfortable talking about in recording, but, like, um, I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, Like, people need to just stop being assholes, like, to each other, like, it's totally fine to, like, be different, like, as long as you know you're not hurting anyone, you're not fucking diminishing anybody, like, that's how I feel anyway. If someone wants to believe in, like, a fucking pasta god, by all means, like, as long as you're not messing with anybody else, like, do what you gotta do, like, who cares? And
That's
then, I don't
yeah,
know.
that's
Historically, though, there's so much history that people are trying to, work with now, and it's hard. Like, it's a hard thing.
can you imagine a cult or a religion where the Shirime is the one true god?
I'm just picturing, like, the whatever their version of, like, the preacher is just, like, up on stage, like, bending over, showing his asshole to, like, everyone in the pews. Or when you come in for, like, some sort of confessional, it's just this, like, eyeball anus, like, that you have to go and, like, pray to.
It's like show me your sin, and then there's this like eye looking back at you, like oh my god,
That's how you're cleansed.
there's this like butt pope, and then there's like this grand eye. Oh,
Oh my god.
that'd be so funny. Shout outs to the Shirime worshippers if you're out there. Right. Hashtag Shirime is the one true god. We're gonna be ripping that from now on. Um, but I gang. So like, well, we're coming up on time, but I did want to miss out on this one last thing. Um, with all the different facets or factors that help with cultivating one's definition of spirituality, whether it's religion, your life experience, your observations or insights. A question for you: how has your spirituality developed over time, before and after Japan?
I think my spirituality got a lot stronger actually after Japan. Um, I spent kind of most of my time because I want to word this nicely. I went to church um, when I was little growing up, um, a lot of different churches. When I was like with my mom, we would go to like Catholic churches, we would go to black churches, we would go and experience lots of different types of worship. My dad's side of the family, the people that went to church went to Baptist church. Um, so already from a really young age, I had witnessed a lot of different ways of practicing religion. So when I was just going to a Christian church, um, I didn't understand like the stuff that they were teaching. I didn't get why things had to be like one way or other people were wrong. I didn't understand things like why homosexuality was bad or stuff like that. Even like not I didn't even know really, what sexuality was and stuff. It was just like I didn't understand how people could be seen as bad for just, being themselves. Um so I was baptized when I was little and I remember you have to sit down and talk to whoever your fucking leader is at the time. And they ask you all these questions like, oh, are you going to accept God into your life? And like, blah, 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 blah. And you're supposed to just be like, yes, yes, and say yes to everything. But I don't understand that. Like, am I just going to say blindly yes and not answer like my own questions? But they want you to be baptized. So they baptized me anyway. Um, but then after that, specifically after I got baptized, I was 7 or 8, I think. And I was like, okay, well, now that I'm baptized and if there is a heaven, I'll go to heaven. Like, I don't need to go to church anymore. That's, that's how I saw it. Um, because that's what my family kept telling me. They were like, well, you need to get baptized because if you don't get baptized, you're going to go to hell. And I was like, well, shit. Okay. And then, so, okay, I've been baptized now, so I'm not going to go to hell. So I can, live my life. Um, and then after that, I was kind of, like atheist. I think I would label myself at the time, because of my own personal experiences and how I perceived the world. I was like, yo, if there is a God, he is a nasty motherfucker. Like, to allow the things that like happen to happen. Um, and then I was just kind of like pretty miserable for most of my life. And when I went to Japan and I started thinking more about like who I want to be as a person and the things that I like, because a lot of my time in Japan that I spent by myself was just observing things or especially like going out into nature and stuff like that. And I kind of reconnected with how I thought like as a kid. And now with the ability to explore that knowledge, like read books or look on the internet, stuff like that, and get more into like a spiritual side of things versus being forced to go somewhere and being told I need to believe these certain things. Um, and then when I came back, I just kind of continued like practicing that and talking to more people about what I believe and actually finding a lot of people that think similar to me. Um, so I think going to Japan really kind of like boosted my desire to be more spiritual.
It also sounds like this element of confidence in there as well. Like
Yeah.
being able to talk about that uh, out loud,
Uh-huh.
or
Uh-huh.
being able to be the beacon for attracting other people who share similar thoughts is also like what I see as something that I noticed in my own, shall we say, journey in spirituality. Because I don't think I've had one. Like I didn't care that much.
Yeah.
Like I'm in a Christian family and we were going to church a lot. And it's not like I was taught about the story of Jesus and the Bible, etc. when I was young, because of all the animism and all of that, like the
Yeah.
lore behind our tribes, etc. That had a greater impact on me than this building that had no aircon that we'd be going to every Sunday at 7 a.m. or whatever it is. Um, and I know that this is like the only reason why we're going there is so that we can sing a few songs and I can get noodles right after because that's like my favorite breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Which I still
Yeah,
eat
right.
even until now. So like, you know, kids never grow up. Anyway, um, when it comes to spirituality, I do really care about that. It seemed more like an obligation, as if this is just a Sunday thing that we do. And
Mhm.
I was already just reluctant to go to church because I didn't know what to think about when you're just sitting there and praying and kneeling and sitting down and standing.
Mhm.
We were just hearing, the priest go up and talk about scriptures and lines from a specific passage. And
Mhm.
it's like, oh, Jesus did this, and then stuff happened, and then he rectified the situation. And everyone's like, oh, cool, you're awesome. And then from there, the priest interprets it, and then it turns into wisdom for everyone to hear. But like, I wasn't really in a position to receive that at all. So when I'm like,
Mhm.
when everyone is like, okay, you can now kneel and pray, I'm like, what do I think about? Like, all I was thinking about was just video
Right.
games, right? Like
Yeah.
like there wasn't really I didn't feel anything from that experience. Um, my own family history had a larger impact. So, there was that. It also, what made it worse was that when we moved overseas, we stopped going to church because we would normally be going to the church in our home country, like in our specific town.
Mhm.
Um, And then I started living alone from when I was 14 onwards, when I went to boarding school. And then from there, I went to Australia. From there, I went to Japan. The thing is, a lot of my personal issues and problems have always been focused on myself,
Mhm,
but more on self improvement and growth,
mhm,
and more so on the way of life, like how to create insight out of a received observation. So there were some Buddhist tendencies in there, right? Like
mhm,
how do we interpret desire? How do we
mhm.
interpret too much or greed or something like that, right? There wasn't
Yeah.
really a religion. And in this context, Buddhism isn't exactly a religion. It's a way of life. It's a way of living, right?
Mhm,
It's sort of like a pact that you made with yourself to better yourself. That's it. Um
mhm,
that was when spirituality had a seed planted within me. When I went to Japan, that's when all of that exploded because,
mhm.
and you know this as well from knowing me, I grew up a lot in that year. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff happened that made me rethink about myself and where I want to go. And when I was like lost in what to do once the exchange was ending, the culmination of experiences, the people I talked to, um, the different cultures, and the immersion in an environment that has elements of Buddhism, Shintoism, Christianity, Islam, etc., not explicitly brought up, but embedded in the day to day life of people,
Mhm,
seemed to be way more comfortable to me, in my opinion.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
and there and what became more important was cultural principles like
Mhm,
wabi sabi or mushin
mhm,
or uchisoto or like saving face or harmony,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Which is probably something we could talk about in another episode, but we'll save it for
mhm.
that. Um, that played a higher part. So spirituality didn't come from a religion. Spirituality came from cultural observation. And
Yeah.
then when I left Japan, I was like, how can I get more of that? I did
Mhm.
not find that in religion. So at this point, I just feel so agnostic. I'm just like, oh, okay, cool, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not like I believe there are gods or there's a higher power. It's more like I recognize the existence of gods and faith,
Mhm.
but as an outsider. Whether I have an opinion on whether or not God exists, I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that. I'm just like, oh, cool, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
they're probably just like chilling upstairs, like looking down on us mere mortals. Like, dude, guys, stop sending nuclear missiles. What the fuck? Right? Like, it's just that.
Yeah.
And while
Like
I'm
the
just
whole oh, sorry. I was just gonna
go,
say, I like the whole thing where people are like, "Yeah, we're just like a bad game of Sims, like for the gods."
yeah,
And it's like, "Yep, yep,
I'm like a shitty safe game. Like
yeah, right,
I'm just not listening to their orders. Right? They're just like,
yeah,
hey,
right."
be more faithful. I'm like, no, fuck you. I wanna drink tequila. And it's just like bad decisions one after the other. Um,
Mhm,
and you know, like spirituality, to be honest, spirituality is a very personal thing. Um,
mhm,
even if yes, the entryway into the path to spirituality can be religion or any other factor, the
mhm,
the end result or the output, a lot of the commonalities stem around what can you learn to better yourself as well as the people that you love, right? Things like
yeah,
kindness and service
mhm,
and stuff like that. Um, for some, it's more of a religious standpoint, and for others, it's no. Um,
mhm,
and I feel like recognizing that is a very healthy thing.
mhm,
And I guess also that recognizing that is another form of spirituality. So I'd say that my spirituality is actually quite strong now because of my
yeah,
understanding of the whole landscape of it.
mm, nice.
My words went all like a fucking roller coaster with that.
I feel like I've been like that this whole episode,
Yeah.
just just going on a tangent, and so we did kind of go like everywhere. So for another episode. I think we should definitely do like a yokai tier list where we can research on our own and bring some into the gauntlet and just let them duke it out.
You want to do like a segment for like every episode? We bring one, like you bring up one yokai and then we talk shit about it and then we decide on a tier, like
We can do
rank,
that, yeah.
and then we'll just
Yeah.
build this rank over time. It's okay. Okay, how about this? Let's end the episode with the following. We've talked about 3 yokais this episode, right?
Mhm.
So the giant catfish, Onamazu,
Yeah.
the Yuki Onna, and the Shirime. Oh, there's more than 3. Sorry, the Shirime, uh, the kitsune, the fox, and tanuki. I think tanuki also counts.
Waterfall Daddy.
And water, yeah, and hot waterfall daddy, the custom one. Okay, let me write that. So, what do you have any immediate rankings for each of them?
I mean, Shirime is definitely like S tier. Like, there's not even a question about it. That there's nothing else to say. It's like the name itself, just fucking ass eye. Like,
Ass eye. Yeah, it definitely is. I put the catfish as like A, like pretty high tier, mainly because we've had earthquakes when we were there. So the fact like that I can now associate a giant catfish with like the shaking of buildings kind of sounds pretty badass.
does that does that like does that equal A though? Like, is it really that close to the Shirime?
Yeah, true. I was just thinking of it as like a very disaster level yokai, so that's why. But then,
Should we award them for that?
I mean, it just shows they're pretty effective at killing people.
That's not. Do you want that as a human though? You are you like, damn, that yokai can fuck me up.
You put Shirime as S tier. Like what the like?
He does not. The Shirime does not hurt anybody. Like, it's just showing off its butthole.
Yeah, but aren't yokai? Don't yokai exist to haunt or disturb us? Like if they're not
All of them. Actually, a lot of yokai are just pranksters.
okay. So wait, how are you ranking this? What's the criteria?
We need to we need to talk about it and revisit. We,
Okay,
we
okay.
don't want to.
You know,
We don't want to hash it
okay,
out.
okay. How about this? How about this? Okay, next episode, right? Next episode, right? We'll have more time to
Like
think
a
about
tier
this.
list.
We will dedicate at least the first half of the episode to a tier list, but for sure, Shirime is S tier. We'll save it. We'll save it for
Absolutely.
later. Okay. How about this? That at least this last one, Hot Waterfall Daddy. What rank is that?
We don't have to. He doesn't exist
Okay.
unless people actually draw this dream man for me. Then we'll see. We'll see if I want to bring him in and like give him a proper personality. Though if he's gonna be like drowning women, women like toxic men though. Yeah, I need to think about it. Like, I need to, I need to think about where he's gonna go.
Okay. Well, we'll save that for another episode. Which is great. Like great ending to this. The conclusion and the takeaway, honestly, is the butt eye is the most lethal yokai out of them all. And with that being said, here comes the ending of Kanpai Chronicles with your host Norman. And
Holly.
so, if you'd like to keep us, keep updated to with the next episode where we start talking about Yokai Part 2, basically, tier lists, etc. If we could just bring a couple more names in. And, subscribe to us in your favorite podcast listening app and give us a review to see what we're missing out on, what we can improve on, etc. And if you want us to cover a specific topic, tweet at us with hashtag Hot Waterfall Daddy or hashtag Shirime is the one true god, or hashtag Shirime actually is probably, I don't know how long can a hashtag be, but it's gonna be one of those. It's gonna be one of those. So with that being said, take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.